Good morning, good evening, whatever time it is, whatever part of the world you're in. And my name is Anthony Prince. As I said a moment ago, I'm one of the organizers for the National Union of the Homeless. We're very glad that you've joined us today to participate in this very special Memorial Day event entitled Veterans, Homelessness, Hunger in a Time of Pandemic. And we're privileged to be joined today by some outstanding leaders across the world, including the founder of Food Not Bombs, Mr. Keith McHenry. Today, we celebrate the 40th anniversary of Food Not Bombs, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we also mark Memorial Day 2020. By way of introduction, I just want to point out that the traditional concept of Memorial Day is that it's simply a day that was designated, I believe, by a retired Union general in 1865. It was supposed to be on May 30th. That's the official version, just kind of a general day on which we lift up and honor and remember service members of the armed services who died in active duty. But in fact, the real origin of Memorial Day is a little bit different, because most historians now agree that Memorial Day actually began on May 1st in 1865 in Charleston, South Carolina, where there was a very significant event where the newly freed slaves actually dug up the buried bodies of those Union soldiers who had died of disease in 1865. There was actually more people that died of disease during the Civil War on both sides than actually killed in combat. And today, as we face this pandemic, which is also impacting our veterans and people across the world, a disease, a pandemic, we're reminded that Memorial Day also began in recognition of those who had perished, in part because of their exposure to disease associated with war. So today we want to begin. We have 10 presenters. We're going to kind of break up the presentations a little bit. And after we are finished with our presentations, we'll open it up for questions and discussion. I believe you can phone in, or rather type in your questions, and we'll field them, and you can direct questions to a particular panelist or to all the panelists. And let's get right to it. I want to introduce our very first speaker, someone I've known for a long time, goes back 30, 35 years ago to the original National Union of the Homeless. She's from Boston, Massachusetts. She's a military veteran, and she was the founder of the Boston Homeless Union. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Savina Martin. Savina?
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. And yes, I've known you for quite a long time. And it's my privilege and honor to be here today with all of my sisters and brothers from across the globe, who I know are picking up the gauntlet and ringing the alarm to all the injustices across this world that we're faced with today. And so I'm happy to be alongside of my brother, especially Keith McHenry, who fed us during the days of the Union. Quite often when we were engaged in housing takeovers. So with that said, I'm going to continue to black out my screen in honor of the women who are unseen and unsung heroes. So this Memorial Day, let us honor the fallen, as well as raise the names of our present women revolutionaries, teachers, and heroes, as well as the forgotten, unsung heroes that paved the way for us. Let us remember the Black woman and brown woman's struggle to call out the racist disparities and the economic injustices that plague the US. Over the course of my life, I joined and served in the military, movements and marches. Along the way, I fought with and learned from heroes like Miriam Kramer, who spent a lifetime of welfare rights organizing in Detroit and across the US and internationally. Dottie Stevens from Boston, Massachusetts, Jackie King, Leona Smith, National Vice President of the Union of the Homeless, and Diane Johnson, Ann Withorn, author of For Crying Out Loud, Women's Poverty in the United States, Boston, Massachusetts. Our past heroes like Johnny Tillman, let us lift their names and say their names. Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, and Assata Shakur. Let us lift up the women who serve today in spaces like the People's Forum, the Poor People's Campaign, and the National Union of the Homeless, and Food Not Bombs, Alicia. The names are many, and they are the women who have served both past and present and will be our future revolutionaries in the US as the war on poor continues to be waged. Let's lift up the efforts of the Poor People's Campaign and the National Union of the Homeless, Food Not Bombs, again, as we ring the alarm loudly for decent housing, food, and health care. We have a task at hand to learn about the forgotten names in history of women who have served on the front lines then and now. These are women, workers, who are left to die alone while romanticized as essential at the same time. Let us recognize the Black essential woman. She has always worked, fought, and died in the US. While we know women, period, have always been essential. During the Civil War, Black women's services included nursing or domestic chores in medical settings, laundering and cooking for the soldiers. Indeed, as the Union Army marched through the South and large numbers of freed Black men enlisted, their female family members often obtained employment with the unit. The Union Army paid Black women to raise cotton on plantations for the Northern government to sell. 5 Black nurses served under the direction of Catholic nuns aboard the Navy ship, check this out, Red Rover. 4 of their names, Alice Kennedy, Sarah Kinno, Ellen Campbell, and Bessie Young, have been recorded. Black nurses are in the record books of both Union and Confederate hospitals. As many as 181 Black nurses, both female and male, served. Susie King Taylor, Civil War nurse, cook and laundress, was raised a slave on an island off the coast of Georgia. Mrs. King signed on as a laundress and nurse, able to read and write. She also set up a school for Black children and soldiers. Those were the survival programs back then. Mrs. King's experiences as a Black employee of the Union Army are recounted in her diary. She wrote of the unequal treatment. No documented records have been discovered of Black women's military service in the American Revolution. They may have all served alongside Black men, though. Today, in the age of COVID-19, Black nurses are dying on the front lines. Similarities to trace those antibodies was used in another form back in 1898. Another example of US invasion of other countries and territories was during the Spanish-American War. Black women served as nurses there as well. The yellow fever and typhoid epidemics led Surgeon General Stenberg and Anita Newcomb, as I wrap up, acting assistant surgeon in charge of nurses, to seek out female immunes. Women who had survived the disease were called the immunes. On July 13, 1898, Nama Yoke Curtis, the wife of Dr. Austin Curtis, he was a superintendent of Freedmen's Hospital in Washington, D.C., was asked to recruit immune nurses. Mrs. Curtis hired 32 Black women who allegedly were immune to yellow fever. Most of her recruits went to Santiago, Cuba in July of August 1898 to serve in the worst of the epidemics. Tuskegee Institute records reveal 5 nursing graduates served in Army camps. Black women nurses were also recruited from the Washington, D.C. Freedmen's Hospital, Providence of Chicago, Massachusetts General, Charity Hospital in New Orleans, and the Phyllis Wheatley Training School. As many as 80 Black women may have served. So in 1978, I marched in the historic last battalion at Fort McClellan, Alabama, the last of the Women's Army Corps. Shortly thereafter, I fled the United States Army after several attempts to go AWOL and was not released until 1984. 1 year later, I joined the National Union of the Homeless and have not looked back since. As we continue to build the movement led by the poor and its allies, let us not forget to memorialize, lift, and honor their unsung efforts to revolutionize a country that forgets those who are left to fight and die alone. May we win this fight, because when we unite, we win.
Well, thank you, Savina. I think you all can see why we asked Dr. Savina Martin, to open up today's proceedings with that powerful historical lesson so relevant today. So thank you. And we'll be hearing more from Savina as we move forward in the program. So next up, we want to bring Jose Vasquez. Jose is one of the, I believe he's the executive director of Common Defense, was formed in 2016 and has been fighting ever since to take up, not just for the veterans, but for society. The common defense of all of society has been just on the front lines of raising the banner, opposing some of the more draconian actions of the President of the United States, and taking up at this moment in the defense in the wake of this pandemic. So Jose Vasquez, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tony. Can you all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I just want to thank you for the invitation to this important webinar and gathering. We at Common Defense, as you said, have been in the fight since 2016, opposing Trump's hate speech when he was a candidate, and certainly everything that he's tried to implement as our commander-in-chief. And I appreciate Savina kind of couching us in the history of Memorial Day and understanding that while most people are probably, enjoying family time and barbecues and sales, that there is a deep history here. This is an opportunity for us to reflect on those that, have sacrificed on the part of the nation. And, certainly those during the Civil War who were on the right side of history and liberation. I thought what I would do for my short time here to share with y'all is just a kind of quick snapshot of like what's going on with the military and veteran community, and probably some of the folks that are tuning in are aware of some of these stories. The way I think about it is, from the point that people enter the system, this institution of the U.S. military, at every stage, we see that capital has its hands in the whole system and in the process. We are certainly proud of people who decide to join the military, but I think we can't lose sight of the fact that ultimately the U.S. military, the role that it plays is to sort of be the police officers for capital. Going all the way back to Smedley Butler, that lesson is not lost on us. So I think that, not surprisingly, the military is trying to take advantage of this COVID pandemic situation to increase its opportunity to recruit, poor people, working class people, people of color into this system that, frankly, often, chews them up and spits them out when they're no longer useful. So one of the ways that the military is doing that is taking the context of COVID and using it as a recruitment opportunity. So they are, approaching people, and sort of playing on their fears of unemployment, of homelessness, of lack of access to healthcare, and telling them, if you join the military, you'll have all of those things. Clearly the risk benefit analysis is pretty high there, because folks are still getting deployed overseas, and the military in general is just a dangerous job. So that's the first lesson is that at any turn and every opportunity, recruiters will tell young people pretty much whatever they need to hear to get them to sign on the dotted line. And that was certainly the case in my experience. As a young person who grew up in the Bronx, South Bronx, and then in Los Angeles, I was in high school when the Rodney King riots happened in LA, and me joining the military had everything to do with, an economic draft and a lack of opportunity, but also, the police brutality and violence that Los Angeles was and still is experiencing at this moment. The next thing I want to share is that, within the military, as much as we spend on the military and as much as the government and military officials like to talk about how ready they are for every scenario, it's clear that when it comes to this pandemic, they just weren't ready. There was a pretty prominent story about a commander of a naval ship that was patrolling the Pacific. He was trying to raise the red flag, sort of sound the alarm about an outbreak of COVID on his boat, which is the USS Teddy Roosevelt, and was not getting anywhere. He wanted to basically dock the ship, let all the sailors off, set up a quarantine, and have the ability to sort of social distance among the sailors that were on that boat. Because if you've ever been on a Navy ship, it's pretty tight quarters. So, he was denied that request and then, decided to go public with his grievance. He was relieved of his command for doing that, but ultimately the military did decide to meet those demands, which is to dock the ship and, quarantine the sailors on there. So, again, as much as we like to lift the military and veterans up on a pedestal, when it really comes down to it, military personnel are workers like anybody else, and the FARA's doctrine says that they can't be unionized, and I think that there's nobody really representing the interests of the rank and file members of the military, and it's really up to commanders with a conscience like this particular commander to be able to stand up to the injustices that the military often will exact on the personnel that are within the ranks. The last thing I'll share is that the Veterans Administration is getting hit pretty hard. The average veteran, there's about 19 million veterans that are alive today. Only about 9 million of them use the VA system, and there have been reports from the VA system itself that thousands of patients have been confirmed with COVID-19, as well as hundreds of staff. At this point, hundreds of veterans have died within the VA care system and the inpatient facilities, as well as nursing facilities. So, there's some pretty shocking numbers from places like New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, many places that the nursing facilities that are often state-run but affiliated with the VA system have reported, in some cases, a facility with like 100 retired veterans, half of them are dying from COVID-19, as well as the staff that work at those places. So, again, the system, really doesn't give a shit about veterans when they leave the system, and these nursing facilities are not getting the personal protective equipment. Testing is not up to speed, and the VA system is kind of caught off guard by this whole thing. Even though part of the VA's mission is to augment civilian medical facilities in the case of a national emergency. So we can see that our systems are just not prepared for this pandemic. Now, in fairness, a global pandemic is not something that happens, all that often. And it's been 100 years since our last one. So I want to, measure what I'm saying by that. But I also think that, there have been many failures at an institutional level, at a political level, where we could have done a lot more to prevent the spread of this disease. And, Memorial Day is certainly a time to reflect on those that have lost, that we've lost to wars. And I also want to say that, when Memorial Day or Veterans Day rolls around, we sort of tend to focus maybe too much on the individuals who served in the military, when the reality is the majority of people who die in wars are civilians, right? Civilian non-combatants that are on the receiving end of bullets and bombs. So I'll leave it there and turn it back to our moderators and just thank you all for the opportunity to speak.
Well, thank you, Jose. That was once again very powerful presentation. We're going to hear more from you as the discussion goes forward. Next up, I want to introduce a individual who I met a few years ago for the first time, and he would come to our meetings in Salinas when we were forming the Salinas Homeless Union. He was kind of a quiet guy sitting in the corner, didn't have a whole lot to say. I was wondering, who is this humble guy who doesn't have a whole lot to say? He's wearing a Food Not Bombs t-shirt. And over the last 2-3 years, I come to realize that Keith McHenry is nothing short of a national treasure. And so I'm going to go ahead and let Keith talk to us a little bit today on the 40th anniversary of Food Not Bombs, how Food Not Bombs began, and what it's currently doing and its mission. And then I'm going to go ahead and let Keith introduce our international Food Not Bombs reporters from four different countries. So Keith, I'm going to turn it over to you, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So the reason we mark the May 24th is because the original collective started that day when one of our friends, Brian Feigenbaum, was arrested at Seabrook Nuclear Power Station on felony assault charges. And the only reason he was arrested was because he was the media spokesperson for the Clamshell Alliance, or for the Coalition for Direct Action at Seabrook, and they knew his name. So they picked him out of a crowd, blockading the entrance to the power station. And so it was a very high bail, and we found a person with a bunch of money who could bail him out that night. And on the way home, we decided that we would create a collective who would at first raise money to pay back the person that freed Brian. And our idea on the way home to Boston was to say that we would do bake sales. Well, that bake sales were not a good way to raise $5,000. And so we were very struggling. We'd get $5, $10 a bake sale after a whole day of baking stuff. And fortunately, I came across a poster in a moving job. I had a van, and we had a company called Smooth Move. And the poster said, wouldn't it be a beautiful day if the schools had all the money they needed and the Air Force had to hold a bake sale to buy a bomber? So we bought military uniforms, and we did our bake sales with the sign. And while we didn't raise more money, we did get a lot more attention, and it was a lot more interesting. At the same time, I was a produce worker, and I've at a natural food store, and I felt horrible that I was throwing away food. So I started taking it to the projects near the store, and learned that the new building across the street was a weapons lab called Draper Lab. And that's where the name Food Not Bombs came from. And then what we would call Food Not Bombs today, the way that we're doing it, we started like, we were doing street theater with free food, vegan food, and Harvard Square and Boston Commons virtually every evening. But on in March of '81, about 2 months after, actually almost exactly a month after Ronald Reagan had become president of the United States, we decided that we would hold a soup line as a street theater outside the stockholders meeting of the Bank of Boston at the Federal Reserve Bank on Atlantic Avenue. And we made a huge amount of food out of the soup, out of the food I was recovering from Bread and Circus, the grocery store. And we realized we didn't really organize enough to get a lot of people to be a soup line. So I went to the Pine Street Inn, which was the only shelter at the time, and gave a speech to the guys sitting around on the floor at about midnight. And it was because of, and told them about this protest. And the people showed up. And a lot of people walking by, and the stockholders at the meeting were really shocked because they had not seen soup lines since the Great Depression. They'd only been in movies for most people. And so I remember one businessman going, oh my God, it's already happening. It's only like a month, and they're already having massive poverty, and people are needing to stand in soup lines. And we had information about how there could be a future if we don't stop the militarization of the Reagan administration and their neoliberal policies, where people would be having to stand in line to get food. And so here we are 40 years later, and sure enough, not only are people all over the world having to seek food from at soup kitchens, but now soup kitchens are shut down like they are here in Santa Cruz, California, because of the COVID-19. And on the beginning of the, when the pandemic first was really becoming an issue here in Santa Cruz on March 14th, we decided that we would set up a 24-hour a day, originally 24-hour a day, COVID relief center with the Santa Cruz Union of Homeless Union, and to take up the slack since there was not going to be food at the other food programs. And the police did not take well to that, particularly to the fact that we actually were, I took money that I had made from selling a farm that I had in New Mexico, and bought hotel rooms for initially 81 people. And then with the Union of the Homeless, we were able to get, because it was very successful the first night, we got hotel rooms for 180 people for the next 2 nights. And then we worked with the Salvation Army, who had people sleeping 8 inches apart, 60 people in a room, coughing on each other, and tried to coordinate and free those people. But the Salvation Army refused to fund any more than 1 day. So we paid for 125 rooms and, or 125 beds. And then this, and by that time, the governor of California had announced that everybody that lived outside would be placed in a hotel room, regardless of their need. That completely changed over time. And even to this day, I think we don't even have 100 people in hotel rooms in Santa Cruz, California, when we have thousands of empty hotel rooms. So this would be today our 72nd day in a row that we have provided free food. We've been kicked out of several places by the police and by the county. And finally, they gave up about 3 weeks ago, and we just, in defiance of the authorities, continue to set up every day at the corner of Laurel and Front Streets. And so that, with that, we can see that the other Food Not Bombs activists are also on the front lines resisting these both the clampdown by government officials in some cases, and struggling in situations where there's very little resources being provided for the most desperate people in our communities. So I'm going to introduce Laura Reddy from Johannesburg, South Africa, and she will tell us about the amazing things that they are doing there, and maybe a little bit about when they started.
Good evening, Kate and everybody. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hi, good to meet all of you, and finally Keith. It's quite an inspiration. In Johannesburg, South Africa, I can say it's about more than 20 years of that 40 years of Food Not Bombs. And we started off a small group of anarchists in Johannesburg where we used to serve food out of a park in Greenside, but it was just a Sunday thing, and just to the people on the street and the hobos and stuff, nothing too big, nothing too politically involved at that time. It was just a few anarchists standing out distro and things like that, but it was pretty fluid and people came in and out. And then when I'm a school teacher by profession, a high school teacher. I spent many of my years in the inner city schools of Johannesburg. So when I was teaching in Hillbrow, there were a lot of kids that came to school hungry. So I decided to start a Food Not Bombs out of my school, my classroom, for the kids that came to school hungry. And from there it sort of grew. And when I left from school to school, wherever I went, I sort of took Food Not Bombs with me. And when I left, the kids sort of took it over. Over the past, I'd say 7 years, I've moved from Food Not Bombs from Johannesburg to Cape Town. Khayelitsha, which is right now, if you watch any international news, Cape Town is the epicenter of the coronavirus in Africa, basically. It is disastrous. I cannot, I'm not exaggerating when I say how terrible it is here politically, in terms of poverty, whatever. It seems literally that the rich here are trying to kill off the poor. Everybody wanted the lockdown to end. The political parties, especially privileged people, basically had no concern that majority of our people live in shacks. They could not follow any sort of regulations in terms of spacing. Food Not Bombs over the past 2 months or stuff, what we've been doing, we went on a big donation run, and we managed to collect a lot of money, even though we were told not to distribute food to refugees. There's a lot, the area that we now are involved in is Durban Deep. It's an area in Johannesburg where illegal miners, they're called zama-zamas, sort of roam. It is, I'd say, no, the media does not know this, the most dangerous, gangster-ridden, rape-ridden, murderous-ridden place in our city. No utilities, no facilities, water, electricity, I'd say for more than 8 years, cut off. So we go into this area every Saturday with our supplies, our food, our medication, and there's also an animal clinic. We do a lot of animal rights work as well in this area. And it sort of has become a refuge for the humans and the children out there, most of them refugees who work the mines illegally. And that's the only source of income. And over the lockdown, we were not allowed, the whole country was in lockdown. We've just come out of level 4 into level 3, which means everybody can go to work now, which we are very scared because there's no protection for the poor. People have been starving. The poverty has already been there, but what has been happening is people have been using the coronavirus as an excuse to open up their NGOs and this and that and collect money, but things are not really going to the people. And that usually happens. The government, social development departments have been stopping people. The same situation that Keith has been explaining that has been happening in the USA, from providing food to the poor that we usually do so. And so the people who were on the streets that we would provide fresh food to, cook food to, have not been getting that. What we have been doing is buying groceries, non-perishable food. So we lots of non-perishable foods like rice and mealie meals, your breads and stuff, things that won't get waste, packaging it and transporting it into the townships and to the rural areas and to the families, at least, especially the compromised families. Lots of them suffering from HIV, a lot of old women taking care of lots of children. And basically, while our movements have been also, kept at home. So with the volunteers here and there and getting permits from the government in order to do things, we have managed, I think. Johannesburg is not so bad at all. I think we've reached 400 and something deaths, and we basically clear to go back. Cape Town is our biggest problem. And come 1st of June, we are very worried about what's going to happen once the schools go back. Because the facilities in South Africa for the poor children are not too good. And hygiene facilities are not good. So we are not prepared for what's going to happen with a virus we know very little about from our side in Johannesburg at the moment. But other than that, we have been making sure that hygiene stuff, sprays, detergents, masks, all those sorts of stuff gets into the people that we usually see. Just somehow we have managed to do that. From our families to the communities to the neighbors around us and friends from overseas, actually, who have sent money from the United States to Food Not Bombs in South Africa, that with a sort of solidarity, I must say, that has been shown is amazing at this time. When people were scrounging around waiting for the government parcels that never came, our parcels were already there, packaged neatly and done. So thank you, I must say, Keith, for inspiring me. I'm from KwaZulu-Natal originally, in Durban, where there's an ocean and it's not so cold. But when I came to Joburg, I have, I'm an activist and a women's rights activist and a teacher and an anarchist and a writer and a poet. But Food Not Bombs has been my, the thing that has kept me most busy, the way in which I've contributed the most. And the good works has been done, I see, with the people involved in our city, where it's not just about politics and this and that. We have really been helping the people in our city who needs it. You know, the others, the forgotten, the refugees, the people on the streets, those kind of people. And a lot of things, ways that we've used over the years to make money as well and to keep our Food Not Bombs going is through our art and our music. And like the Myanmar guys, there's a lot of punks involved and musicians and hip hop guys. And I do poetry as well. We're doing one on Monday. I invited Keith to it, and I'll share it on Facebook, the way we're raising funds for gender-based violence and things like that during Corona. So yeah, that's the roundup. Okay.
So nice hearing. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so now bye-bye for a second.
Bye.
And in Sofia, Bulgaria.
Hiya, I'm Galina. Well, let me tell you our story too. Laura's was really powerful. I should probably give you some cultural context here, since it's not just about this pandemic. It's a wider context that we should keep in mind, since there's actually been 3 waves of Food Not Bombs activism in Bulgaria so far. And the first one started around the turn of the century, prompted by a decade of disillusionment with the transition from totalitarian socialism in the country, with its coercive collectivism, its fake statist solidarity, scarcity, and oppression of individual freedom, to authoritarian capitalism with its anti-social extreme individualism and competitiveness, failing to address the fundamental issue of concentrated power and increasing the concentration of otherwise more abundant, relatively abundant resources. So the second wave then witnessed the deepening of the social divide and inequalities, the degradation of the environment and the absence of civic control over public spaces, over the commons. So these first 2 waves of resistance by means of communal food preparation and sharing were challenged by the authorities in public, and there were arrests and fines which interrupted the movement. But the current Food Not Bombs wave in Sofia has been on the rise for 4 years now. So it's been building on the experience of the previous 2 waves, and it's been challenging the establishment while avoiding confrontation. There's been some tactical compromise in terms of interacting with the authorities, specifically the local municipalities, or with small businesses or churches, with some registered NGOs. We've been applying the intersectional approach to socioeconomic change, and we've been developing the Solidarity Club, that's what we call it, of proactive volunteers, but also of like-minded organizations focusing on various aspects of the common struggle, be it human and non-human animal rights, zero waste, urban and guerrilla gardening, solidarity economy in general. And we've also been experimenting with different locations. So if one location was inappropriate for some reason and we were struggling to be active there, we would move and be flexible about it. We've been in public spaces, we've rented places. There have been plans to squat places, which is really challenging in in the Bulgarian legal context. But what's been most prominent, I suppose, is the expanding of the type of activities done with rather than for the disadvantaged people, and placing some extra emphasis on social inclusion and facilitated self-empowerment. So we don't do charity, but solidarity, right? We do things with the disadvantaged and help them empower themselves. And this has implied various activities. So it's not just the communal kitchen. We've provided solidarity showers for people who have no access and have issues with their personal hygiene, some medical hygiene supplies. We've been sharing clothing too. We've been providing opportunities for urban gardening and communal gardens. And which is really important, we've made attempts to include people in decision making as to what is happening, how it is happening, by organizing public assemblies. And to be honest, more specifically about the pandemic and the deepening war on the poor, on the disempowered, on those left most even more vulnerable by the COVID-19 pandemic. We've found it most challenging to have to quit on assemblies, for instance. Social distancing, we had to make sure that social distancing didn't equal social isolation and social exclusion. This has been the major challenge. We didn't really have the chance, haven't really had the chance to go back to our assemblies where we could do things together and everybody could take part in decision making. We had to restrict inclusion, participation in our activities, communal cooking. We had to revert to, had to outsource some of the cooking, so to say, to licensed kitchens and stick to the logistics of trying to provide food cooked for us by friendly organizations. There's been persecution based on intense police presence in public spaces for the purpose of enforcing emergency state measures during the lockdown. There's been extra stress regarding the protection of vulnerable people from the virus and rendering them even more vulnerable, especially in the context of their marginalization. We've been wondering how on earth does one stay at home when they have no home? And how do we balance between helping the disadvantaged and protecting the relatively vulnerable members of our families without placing them at risk and so on? So, one of the most challenging things has been, well, it's not just the authorities, it's the general public that has been displaying racist, homophobic attitudes and the so-called aporophobia, that fear of the poor. It's been feeling like a war on the poor in really hard times for all of us. But I suppose that following that motto of solidarity, not charity, in anarchist terms, has been has helped us survive, and we've been out on the streets and squares and other spaces where vulnerable people are concentrated, and we're not giving up. And, yeah.
Thank you so much. Wow, I learned so much that I didn't know about your history. Beautiful. Okay, now, I don't know how to say your name, Khwai, from Yangon, Myanmar, formerly Burma, which I don't know why they always call it formerly Burma, but Anyway, and it's now like 3 o'clock in the morning for you. So we want to introduce you to
Good
the world.
morning.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Okay, you can speak.
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. We cannot hear him. And how do you say mute? He's muted.
Hello.
Oh, there we
are.
go. There we
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Okay, cool.
Figured it out. Go ahead.
Okay. So how's it been going over there? And when did you guys start? And it seems like you have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 cities. And I watched you all do a flood a few months ago where you brought all kinds of food to that. And you have the conflict of the Rohingya that you've been working to support. And it sounds very brave.
Okay, sorry, my English is not so well, so I
Very
hope
good
you
so far.
understand. Okay, my name is Jojo. I am from Myanmar, or you can call Burma, doesn't matter. So we start Food No Bombs since 2013. We had the music band, name is called Rebel Riot. We in 2013 we play in Indonesia, Bandung City. Then we found the Food No Bomb action there. They did Food No Bomb in Indonesia, Bandung City. So we really like the idea and what they're doing. Then we decided when we go back, we should start Myanmar chapter. Then everybody agreed that. So normally, you know, every Monday night we hanging out and drinking and doing shit and talking shit. Then after we come back from Indonesia, we discussion ourselves. We always singing the song. We always complain the system. Fuck the government, fuck the system, about the poor people. So we forget to complain ourselves. We should do something, you know, complain is easy. I mean, so we should start ourselves, even small change. Then we, normally every Monday night we drink 5 beers, for example. Then we drink 2-3 beers and another rest of money we save. We save and we buy some noodle and we cook our stuff. Just small thing like a few 50 people or 20 people or 30 people. First time we are very difficult. Every Monday night we trying to find the homeless people. Some people they sleep on the street. Once they saw us, they run away because they thought we are gangster. We want to beat them, and you know they don't trust us. We give the food to them, and they run away. We say, no, uncle, please wait, don't run away. We want to give food to you, and they don't trust. Then we say, no, there's a food for you. We cook for you. Then are you sure? Yes, because I think before we did this, they have a lot of problem with the police. Police trying to arrest, or also some street gang fight to them, or you know they have a lot of trauma from the system, trauma from the other people, trauma from the police. So when they saw us, they don't trust us because we have the tattoo and hair color, so they run away. But after 2 or 3 months, they are waiting punks all the way. A lot of street kids and a lot of homeless people. Oh, punks coming, you know. Then we start Food No Bomb 2013. Also in Myanmar is, you know, we are the military system for so long. Also we had the civil war until now. We have the, you know, we are a lot of ethnic group like Burma, Kachin, Kaya, Kayin, Chim, Mon, Rakhine, Rohingya. We have lots of different groups. So Burmese military, they want to occupy everything about land. They want to make business with China and everything. They want to occupy everything. So other national like Rakhine people, like Kachin people, they don't like. So they always fight until now. So we have the lots of civil war until now. Even the COVID-19 time, they still fight. So Food No Bomb is really right idea and right thing to do in Myanmar because of we had the military system for so long, and also civil war very often. So we should show them, you know, what is more important, food or bombs. Sometimes we rude to them, food no fucking bombs, or you know, we rude to them and we say that. So then we had the more volunteer, a lot of young people are coming up. Then we are every Monday night we distribute food, and since 2013 until now, then we had another project called Books No Bombs. Books No Bombs is for the kids. We try to give books to read, because of only two things important than Rapon, food and books. So food no bomb and books no bomb chapter we run. So during COVID-19, you know, everywhere say stay home, but before you say, some people have no home. Also, the workers, they also big problem because factory are closed. Some greedy owners are run away. So we very sad. Of course, we also scary for virus, but you know, we scary more people are hunger. Then we try to change a little bit what we can. So we support to the workers. Here, a lot of poor people in Myanmar, not only homeless, not only beggar, also a lot of poor people, street seller, and sex workers, and you know, we try to support rice and everything what they cook. Regularly, we cook ourselves, but you know, if we cook ourselves, they can eat only one time. If we support rice and other stuff, they can eat like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So we support, you know, without cooking, they can cook themselves. So we support them, and it's really, you know, a lot of when we stand for COVID-19 time, a lot of people also solidarity with us, and we, you know, sometimes we are not given only food and we are not given only physical stuff. We also given the mental health, like be brave, don't give up, stay strong. We are together with you guys, solidarity. You know, we are all human beings. We are not. We don't need not only physical stuff. We also need someone kind us. So they also human. They need our kind. So we give food and we say something positive way. Grandma, grandpa, or uncle, auntie, brother, sister, don't worry at all. We are solidarity with you guys. Be strong. You know, we will support what we can. Even this, they are very good energy, I think. So we try to support them, and very, you know, I'm really proud and really happy to do Food No Bomb movement in my country. Also, really thank you so much, everyone, for tonight, for today. Also, you know, the idea, and you know, this is, I always explain to other people, this is a, you know, molecular revolution. We don't complain the darkness in the world. You know, the whole world is already darkness by greedy, by selfish, by weapon, by civil war, by virus, you know. So we don't complain anymore. We want to create our own light, you know. Food No Bomb is a revolution for humanity. Food No Bomb is, you know, we create our own light in the darkness world. Even we all die, the energy is still burning, and you know, the light is still exists after we die, maybe next 100 years later, 200 years. But I trust our next generation are more fire than us. The light is more bright than, you know, revolution is, this is a molecular revolution. So I really believe and I really strong, because of, I already tired, you know, to complain the system. We should do something right now. Also complain is good, you know, without complain also not good. I mean, complain and do something. This is more, more powerful for me. So yeah, I really happy, and I have such a chance to talk this. Thank you so much for everyone.
Thank you.
Really happy and solidarity forever.
Happy anniversary, everyone.
Yeah. So thank you so much for idea and what you can do. You know, we had to stand up for humanity always. We had to fight for our humanity. We never give that. You know, this action is the best action for humanity. I really appreciate all what you are doing. You know, really happy, and thank you so much for everyone.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. Okay, Emmanuel. Now, Emmanuel's my dear friend who has been very involved in helping really inspire a movement through Latin America, and particularly in Mexico. And we met quite some time ago when I was participating in a punk tour of northern Mexico in my school bus, which eventually became named Katrina because of the 8 months it lived in New Orleans during the hurricane. And so welcome, Emmanuel.
Hello, hi to everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Beautiful.
Great. So it's really great to see you again, Keith. Long time since the last time we saw. And it's very nice, and for me it's very exciting to meet people from all over the world that do Food Not Bombs. It's very nice to see Galina with your spoon in your hand. It's cool. And finally met Kaiwan. Sorry for misspelling your name, from Myanmar. They are making really very good work. What you are doing there, it's really amazing. I'm following you on Facebook, and it's really great. So as Orlando Food Not Bombs. Nice to meet you, Lara, from South Africa, and what you're doing in the U.S. with the Homeless Coalition. It's really amazing how to start working from zero and now see where are you up to. It's really amazing and incredible. So let me talk a little bit about Food Not Bombs here in Mexico and what is the situation with this terrible pandemic. So I don't remember, Keith, when was the first time we met, but it was that time you said when you came here in the school bus. I don't remember if it was late 90s or perhaps early 2000s. I can't remember.
It was early 2000s. Yeah, I lived that was probably 2001 or 2. And it had a very nice police presence during my visit with you. I was greeted in Monterrey by the chief of police, 5 patrol cars, and a helicopter. And it was very nice welcoming that you had.
Yeah, I remember you were in a school bus with 2 bands from Nogales and from Hermosillo, La Merma and Sociedad Discriminada. We made some punk shows, and we made a gathering also about Food Not Bombs. And so after your visit, we start doing Food Not Bombs, and we've been doing it for almost 20 years. Maybe we stop for a couple of years. We have like a standby. Normally we share food once per month, and our best times we were sharing food maybe 2 or 3 times per month. What we do is, like everybody, we collect food and then we cook it and share it for free in public plazas. And what something that is special for us is that when there's a protest or a march or a gathering or some event, they always call us to share food and to explain what is Food Not Bombs about. So we've been helping a lot of marches and protests, some events regarding the Zapatistas army. When in 2002, 2004, I don't remember, when it was a forum of the World Trade Organization, something like that, in Monterrey. We made the food for maybe 5 days that it lasts. And there's a sad thing that we experienced here. I think early 2000, maybe 2004, 2005, 8 volunteers of Food Not Bombs Monterrey went to a protest in Guadalajara, Mexico, and they were beaten and they went to jail by the police in the fascist state of Guadalajara, Mexico. And we struggled for getting them out. At the end, maybe two of our volunteers, friends, I don't know if I can tell the names or not, but they were two girls, 2 ladies, and they spent more than a month in jail just for being in a protest. They were charged with some crimes that they didn't commit. And we got a lot of support from international support from many chapters, from Keith himself, and many people helping them to get out. And finally, after at least a month in jail, we got them out. So one of them, actually, she appears in a photo on your last book published, and the picture from Monterrey. She's in that photo on the table. So I don't know if I can say her name, but I won't. But she appears on that photo. So we've been giving some conferences in college, in universities. Keith has been here maybe 2 or 3 times, and once we went to I think we went to a university together. So many things we have been doing here. It's very funny that here in Monterrey, we don't have a proper problem with police. And it's very funny because it's very difficult in some other cities. But what it happens very often here is when we are, before we start sharing food, when we are placing the table and the food, police always come. But they always go with the ladies, with the girls, like trying to be like a macho thing with the girls and trying to convince them for something else. It's very strange. And now when they see that we are only sharing food, they say, oh, okay, go ahead, no problem. But it's very, very strange that police want to go out with our ladies or with our girls. It's very strange and a little sad and a little funny. Right now, here in Mexico, we have been in many cities, like I think Tijuana, Guadalajara, Zacatecas, Mexico City. They have 2 chapters, Oaxaca. I know Keith went to Cancun to some protests there, and there was food not bombs going on out there. So many, many things happening. And during this pandemic, we have been only able to go and share food, I think, twice. I don't remember if the first time it was during the pandemic or not, but the last time I was not able to do it. So some friends from here, Michelle and other guys, they went out and they said that the strangest thing they saw is that people living on the street, the homeless, they say that police were asking them to hide. They don't care if they were living okay or if they were dying. They were saying, hide. We don't want you to be in an open spot. And they were asking, oh, you're worried about my health. And they said, no, just go away. Like they're trying to make us think that there's no one living on the street and we should not be worried about. So it's really, really sad that instead of being worried about their health, they were worried about the appearance, of the apparel of the city, instead of some major issues. So another sad thing that we have been seeing here in Monterrey, Mexico is that, the good thing is that many people is organizing as Food Not Bombs with a different name and going out and sharing food. Some vegetarian or vegan restaurants and some people, they are organizing and sharing food. That's very nice. But what is sad is I saw on the news that very close from my house, maybe 14, 15 kilometers away, there was some people organizing sharing food and police came and took them to jail because it's they say that you cannot be gathering people outside, it's illegal and you have to go away. But the next day, a politician go out to the streets sharing foods, despensas that we call it in Mexico. It's a plastic bag with rice, food, and many food with their sticker of the political party. So it's very sad that they're allowed to go and share this political party food, but people organizing themselves, they cannot go away, they cannot go out and share food. So I think even that here is Latin American is very different from Bulgaria, Johannesburg, or the US, but the system applies the same techniques that they say that they are the only ones who can help. They are the only ones that should exist. The organized people should not exist. So it's really, really something amazing, and I don't see any reason of that. And just to end about this, something very sad that is happening here in Monterrey. Monterrey is an industrial city. It's in some terms it's kind of similar than like Texas, or we want to copy many things from Texas as a city. and it's a little different from South Mexico or Central Mexico. And I was expecting to see more people helping and with mutual aid. And what we are seeing is that people is going out to the stores to buy a lot of toilet papers. That's how you say it in English, toilet tissue paper, okay? Buying a lot of this paper, buying a lot of pasta, tomato soup, and beers. The governor of the state said they will cancel the beer production for 1 month, and many people got out to the streets, to the stores, and purchased a lot of beer, a lot of beer. And now every time a truck comes with beer, there's a lot of lines of people on the streets. And many people say, you are not complaining for being on the streets for beer, but you complain when you are on a line on a hospital. Hospitals are really crowded. Many people want to go inside and they can't, so they're making a line and they're always complaining, but they don't complain for going and purchase beer. So it's something very strange that this pandemic is brought here. So Food Not Bombs in Monterrey since 2002, 2003, when Keith McHenry was here, it was formed by a group of punks and anarchists. And now I think it's the same. We are always like 6, 7, 10 people involved, and I hope that we continue like this. And thanks a lot, and really nice to meet you all of you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Beautiful.
And also, this is besides of the 40 years anniversary of Food Not Bombs, is my youngest son 15 anniversary. Yeah, so it's
wonderful.
Congratulations.
That's great.
Thanks.
Well, listen.
Gracias.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, so we want to go ahead and we have 3 more speakers, and then we're going to open it up for some more discussion, and if there's some questions from people who are attending the webinar. But let me first say, before I introduce our last 3 speakers, that it is really a privilege to see all of the sisters and brothers from around the world explaining what they're doing. And it, to me, just shows the universality of this self-organization of poor and homeless and working class people. I think what Emmanuel just said hit it right on the money. What they really fear is the self-organization. What they really fear is an independent movement of the dispossessed. And have been creating for decades that movement. And I think we all know we're at a critical juncture in the development of this unified global movement. And so it's really, I think this is just the first step of what I hope will be a whole series of discussions just like this, so we can deepen our understanding, figure out the ways we can collaborate together. So speaking of collaborating, we want to bring on our next speaker, Alicia Kuhl. Alicia is the president of the Santa Cruz Homeless Union, and I'll let her tell her story as to how she got into that position. But I will tell you that in Santa Cruz, we're really creating a prototype with Keith's leadership and Alicia's leadership, a real collaboration, a political collaboration of a project survival and an organization to actually empower and organize the poor and homeless. So without further ado, Alicia, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So I became part of the Homeless Union because I kind of jumped into it. I became homeless because I had a really bad landlord. He stole my deposit. I ended up in an RV. And at the same time, there was a large homeless encampment here in Santa Cruz called the Ross Camp of about 200 people. My best friend Desiree was living there. And the camp had no representation. I was going to multiple city council meetings. I started getting involved, and I noticed that city council was just talking about them as if, you know, they were these people. They weren't going in there and asking them what they wanted for themselves, anything. So I created what was called the Ross Camp Council, which is a group of people within the camp that could speak for themselves, speak about what they wanted, what was going on there, and things like that. Moving forward, I became involved in a pro se lawsuit to stop the city from evicting all of those residents without putting them into housing, a safer place to be. We didn't win that lawsuit, but we changed the narrative here in Santa Cruz. We were able to show that we have a serious lack of shelter. We have a serious lack of services. One thing I will say is I'm honored to be on this call and to hear that it's interesting that this struggle is universal, it's global. I heard several things that really stuck out to me, that the system is using the same tactics everywhere. I'm noticing that this struggle is echoed. The food insecurity, the tactics, the police tactics, it's just all being echoed. I heard a lot of things that are happening here, and they're happening everywhere. So I don't really know, like, really kind of what else to say. I mean, being involved in the Homeless Union, we're very close with Food Not Bombs because I met Keith McHenry at a Huff meeting. And Keith feeds people here in Santa Cruz. And that's really important. I'm honored to be a part of that. As a member of the Homeless Union and the president of the Homeless Union, I've been able to help Keith and providing things even beyond food. I mean, I was involved with the hotel voucher distribution. We've helped people with face masks. We've helped people fix their vehicles, homeless people who are living in their vehicles with basically nowhere else to turn. We have a serious lack of services here in Santa Cruz, especially right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. Food Not Bombs is one of the only places that you can get food. And it's just really important to have that here. I'm honored to know Keith. This is wonderful that it's the 40th anniversary. One thing I will share is that my partner, Eric, several years ago, he had a heroin addiction, and Food Not Bombs was one of the only places that would feed him, that would give him any food and show him any dignity and respect as a human being. And so Food Not Bombs has a special place in my heart, and I'm glad to be a part of the union and Food Not Bombs. So I will turn it back to Keith.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Beautiful. Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to the other union members that Anthony needs to introduce. But also, I just want to add, it's very common that people come to Food Not Bombs and tell us during the pandemic, during these 72 days, that the only fresh water they have access to is at Food Not Bombs. And that is frightening, in that we are the wealthiest county in the world, and you cannot find fresh water if you live outside. And we have the same problem where homeless people are driven off of street corners to hide. And they're not as overt as Emmanuel was talking about, but it's very, very similar. And at the very beginning of this crisis, they set up what they call triage centers, which were cages, fenced in areas all around town where homeless people were supposed to stay for 72 hours. And it had all the air of being a concentration camp.
No food.
And no food. They did provide a portable toilet, but you'd be in the hot sun in a cage for 72 hours, no medical teams provided. And that's the attitude they have here. No one has been tested that lives outside. We have no idea how many homeless people have died from COVID-19. All of that is a mystery. And besides the speakers that we've had today, which is, I've learned so much and it's so inspiring, and I hope we can do actually a Zoom with with hundreds of Food Not Bombs people at some point to all get to know each other. There are people doing this in every corner of the world. The stuff that is happening in Indonesia now and in the Philippines, there are people being persecuted, feeding the homeless in the Philippines. And we've had a number of arrests in Russia for feeding the hungry, in Moscow and other places. So this is truly a global movement, and it's also connected to homeless rights activism all over the world. And we are really proud to be a part of the National Union of the Homeless here in the United States.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you so much for that. And I think now we'll go to, I think that's a good segue into our second to the last speaker, Daniel Ochoa Jr. Daniel is, I think, the second newest local in the California Homeless Union statewide organizing council. Daniel is legendary in El Centro. When I went down to meet with him a few months back, we every opportunity we had to talk was interrupted by people walking by. Hey, Daniel, what's happening? Hey, Daniel, what's happening? He literally knows everybody in El Centro, and I would argue perhaps 1/3 of the people in Imperial County, which is the furthest south county and one of the poorest counties in the state of California. Daniel's father was a legendary Vietnam veteran who came back to Imperial County, devoted his whole life, not just to helping veterans, but the entire community that had struggled with housing and had become homeless. So Daniel, I turn it over to you for your report from Imperial County. Go ahead.
Thank you, Anthony. It's an honor to be here. Like you said, I mean, yeah, everywhere I go, everybody knows. It's just my network, I call it. But if you guys could hear me, I just want to know if you guys could hear me, audio and video.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. And the reason it's an honor to be here, it's just like I said, I've been helping homeless, working on growing this organization here in Imperial Valley. I was in a meeting last night, late last night, to 3 in the morning. It was in a powwow. I was a powwow working with other organizations regarding mental health in our society here in Imperial Valley, because we have a hard stigma with our homeless association, our veterans / our youngsters are going through PTSD and mental illness, and that's what our topic was last night to 3 in the morning last night. Well, we're drinking wine, but that was just our topic. But it's a big dilemma, and hearing the one from Mexico, it's true. The people from Mexico are coming to the United States, which I'm not too far from the border here. They're coming to the United States to get beer, but when they're sick, they want to help right away. Our culture, Hispanic culture, and I've seen that happen. Our Hispanic culture now are crossing the border to COVID-19. They're coming over here for help. Now they're rerouting all the COVID-19 patients to San Diego now, and they're overflooded in local hospitals now. So the federal government came into our local IBC, which was yesterday, and they opened a space, and I went there as media to be part of it, but they won't. They said no, I couldn't be part of it. They just sent us pictures, what's going on that side. But on the COVID-19, it just what I'm surprised is that things are just happening day in, day out. I call it the media is not telling the truth. Thanks to my eyes and ears out there, they're telling the truth what's going on with our veteran society, with all society, and our homeless society. Just we really got 100 FEMA RVs came in. That came through. Our homeless, over 200 homeless already are in RVs and hotels, but when I ask for the information, they won't give me that information, which is fine, and I'm fighting for that information. But I just got to say that I'm glad I'm around with brothers and sisters here, and it's awesome to be. Memorial Day is very deep to my heart. My dad was very involved, and I took over the torch, and tomorrow we're going to be honoring guards, our veterans tomorrow, so it's an honor that I'm going to be part of it as well. In our cemetery and our local park, we're going to be doing that. I'll be taking pictures. So I'm excited. It's a dear to me to honor my father and other fellow veterans in the Imperial Valley. I mean, it's a big thing for me. I mean, I take it very seriously. And that's all I got to say. I mean, keep it short to the point, you know.
Okay, Dan, hopefully we'll hear some more from you when we get to some discussion in just a couple of minutes. But what we'll do now, we'll have our last speaker, and then, as I say, we'll kind of open it up. And I want to introduce to you someone I've known for many, many years. Bruce Perry was a captain who served in Vietnam and returned to the United States and studied and learned and reflected back on his experience in Vietnam. And since then has emerged as one of the premier organizers and leaders not just of the veterans' struggles, but the broader struggle for economic justice in this country. Bruce was involved with the original National Union of the Homeless. Bruce and I were on the front lines in Chicago when we took the boards and snapped the locks off vacant housing and put homeless people in there. He gave some of the most inspirational speeches I've ever heard at the Up and Out of Poverty back in the day. And he's just an outstanding individual. He happens to be the former treasurer and current treasurer and former chair of the Illinois Coalition of Veterans Organizations. So Bruce Perry, I turn it over to you to kind of wrap up our list of presenters. Bruce?
Thank you very much, Tony. And I just want to say how honored I am. I want to thank Kristen and Tony and Laren for putting all this together. But Keith, congratulations on 40 years, and all the other members of Food Not Bombs. That's absolutely awesome. I'm honored to be on a call with people from all over the world that is doing this work. And, there you go, the bolt cutters, there you go. Seen them, used them before for sure. And, it's to see the similarities of what's going on all over the world, and to be on the call with Daniel, Jose, and Savina, and other veterans that are participating in this movement. I am a Vietnam veteran. I served for 20 months in Vietnam from 69 to 71. Actually, all of 1970, 50 years ago, I spent the whole year in Vietnam. I was in the infantry in the Army with the 1st Cav Division, and I saw a lot of combat. When I left the country, everybody in my unit knew that we were fighting everybody in the country. And I believed in democracy. And if you believe in democracy and you're fighting everybody, you're on the wrong side. And I came back from Vietnam, serious PTSD, but I understood that. And that's how I became part of the movement to end homelessness and to fight for the rights of poor and working and dispossessed people around the world. And because this is an international struggle, and that's what I love about this webinar so much. And I understood, I studied and I learned why it is that we do not have democracy, and learned that it's a much broader struggle than I realized when I first came home. I kind of crashed and burned in the late 80s. Alcoholism, depression, PTSD led to all of those things. I did participate in the takeovers of the National Union that Tony referred to, and I was involved heavily in the movement, never realizing that a couple of years later I was going to be homeless. And in 1993, with the depression, with the death of my mother, with a marital breakup, all happening within a couple of months, I wound up being homeless. I was saved actually at that time by the Veterans Administration, putting me in a 3-month inpatient program for PTSD, and pulling me out of my homelessness. And my mother died in that period, and they still let me go on. And that was very important to me. But I have been involved in this movement, for a long time. And one of the things that I've learned a lot about the veterans movement as well. I've been involved in the veterans movement since 1980. And Savina really gave a lot of history. Tony gave some history of it. The first encampment in Washington, D.C. was the bonus march of the World War I veterans, demanding that the government pay them their bonus as the Depression deepened. And of course, they were run off by and attacked and eliminated by the U.S. Army, led by General Douglas MacArthur and his 2 aides, Major George Patton and Major Dwight D. Eisenhower. And there are photos of them being wiped out. And but that encampment and that March on Washington became a model for the civil rights movement. And veterans were instrumental in the development of the civil rights movement in this country, and then ultimately the human rights movement. And today, veterans continue to play a leading role. We have a whole set of experiences around organization, the need for organization, how to organize, and the discipline that's necessary for that. And therefore, veterans have become leaders in the homeless movement because of their experience. They also have access to some assets. One of the, right now we are in a process where some of our veterans are going out and leading the feeding and the provision of PPE, personal protective equipment, to the homeless encampments. And everybody's already said it, we're supposed to be social distancing, and they're arresting people for not social distancing, and the encampments are out there, and they're, and they're being run off and having to move. And, we see all the things that are happening. They have no sanitation. They have no water. The city can put people into hotels. And of course that didn't happen, or it happened to 5 people or something like that. But the experience of veterans, their knowledge, and their respect throughout society. I'm always reminded of the Occupy movement in 2011, when there was a Marine sergeant, and this went totally viral. There was a Marine sergeant who stopped the police from dispersing the Occupy movement. And he did it for no other reason than he was a Marine sergeant. He happened to have on his camos with his rank on it. And the police had to stop and back off. That's the kind of leadership that veterans have and can provide, to the movement of the poor and dispossessed. So I'm very proud of being a veteran. It took a long time for me to get there. And we find a lot of veterans that aren't, but they still have that pride lying underneath their external facade, and we can play a crucial role within the veterans movement. I just wanted to bring that message to everybody, and again, thank everybody for their input and for their incredible experiences. Like Keith, I've learned an incredible amount today. And with that, I will pass it back to Tony. Thank you.
Okay, Bruce, thank you so much. We'll hear a little bit more from you, I hope. Now, at this time, I'm looking at my screen here, and it doesn't appear that there's any questions being raised by those who are participating. And so maybe what we could do is take a couple of minutes. We want everyone to hang in here because we have a special presentation before we sign off today. We'll get to the special presentation in a moment. But why don't we just spend a couple of minutes and hear perhaps some more from our presenters. If you do have questions, send them in now, those who are listening. We're recording this event and we'll make it available. I also understand that today we have set up our Homeless Union YouTube channel. We'll be making a big announcement about that. And certainly we want to, as Keith indicated, and I think it's a good idea, to set up more of these kind of gatherings so that we can really see and learn from each other around the world. We have so much to learn, we have so much to share, and we're breaking new ground. So let me just invite the panelists, if you have a minute or so, want to say something additional, you're welcome to do so. Don't everybody speak at once? Yeah, Emmanuel, go ahead. Go for it. Yeah.
I will try to be as direct as possible. I hope I don't get my words misunderstood. But well, my question is, when you are a veteran in the U.S., do you have some rights after going to a war? I mean, if you go to a war and you're a veteran, does the government give you like a pension? I don't know if I could say in English, like a for life salary or something like that? Or what's going on after a veteran comes back from a war or a service?
Yeah, when veterans come back from war and they've served, first of all, a lot of what a veteran gets depends on the discharge that they have. And what's happened is people come back from war, we're having 22 suicides a day of veterans. We're having PTSD is rampant, and my position is almost everybody that goes to combat it comes back with PTSD. Their statistics are lower, but my experience is a lot of PTSD. So people act out in the military, and then the military throws them out with something other than an honorable discharge, and then they lose a lot of benefits. The only benefits that really occur when you come home are education benefits that you may have gotten from the military. And if you have a disability, you can then apply for disability. And that process can take anywhere from 120 days, which is what the military, or what the Veterans Administration says, to years. It took me 4 years to get disability benefits. So many veterans get some sort of disability benefits. There are 2 years, it's been increased to 5 years of VA healthcare for veterans coming back. But that, and then after that, if you don't have disability, you may have to have co-pays and things like that. So the resources available to veterans are really substandard, and they've even divided veterans into 8 categories, where some of the lowest categories are, they call them priorities. Some of the lowest priorities are not even allowed to register for the healthcare at the VA, depending on their income. They have a means test every year that's done, and it's done. But now it used to be you had to go in and tell people what was going on. Now it's done behind their back through the IRS, through computer records. So you don't even really know what's going on with that. We've been fighting against that for a long time. So that's basically the situation that veterans face. And of course, many veterans, what therapists call institutional transference. And what that basically means is they come out, they have learned what the military actually is and what its role is in the world to go and invade other countries and to kill and oppress. Mostly civilians, as already been said, most of the people die in war are civilians. And then they come back, they hate the military, they want nothing more to do with it. And they transfer that hatred to the VA and refuse to go to the VA and refuse to deal with other kinds of institutions, agencies that are available to them. So you see a lot of veterans, not all, but a lot of veterans that even refuse some of the benefits they're allowed and have even a harder time. Many, many, many veterans are in school. They go back to school because of their education benefits and then have to transition from school into the quote real world, and they're using school to transfer into the real world. And that's an extremely difficult process as well.
Okay.
So that's sort of the answer. I wanted to add 2 things that I didn't say. It's clear from what everybody has said that this is, that capitalism and the capitalist class is on the attack virtually everywhere in the world, and that the way they're doing that is very similar around the world. But the one thing that this COVID-19 crisis has proven is that for all of their lies and for all of their denial over the years, the money is available to do all of the programs necessary to take care of the homeless, the disadvantaged, the veterans, and everybody else, because they've had this money and giving it all to the banks and to the companies. That money has always been available. And, today, this crisis has proven that everything they're saying about not having the money and not having the resources is an absolute lie. They're just not giving them and allocating them to the poor and to the homeless and to those who need them. I meant to say that at the end of my thing and I didn't. So thank you.
Good. That's the point. That's the whole point there. Savina, Jose, or Daniel, did you want to add a little bit more to Bruce responded to Emmanuel's question. We have just a couple more minutes before our special presentation. So Savina, Jose, or Daniel, did you want to add?
Well, there are many, many contradictions, of course, in perspectives, you know, depending upon the individual. I know that I was fairly, as a high school student, seduced by the recruiters that come to the school. And this is the poverty draft, right? They come in and you're from a poor, low-income family, and it all sounds good, you know, the benefits. Oh, you can help your mom, you can help your dad, you can help, you know, buy the family more food. You know, you can do everything in your mind being that young and being seduced, right? And you go in, everybody has their own different experience. I went in on the heels of the military being co-ed. And that was a nightmare in itself, that whole transition. So, you know, we've always been struggling around, you know, white male domination. You know, the military is a white man's playground, right? I mean, come on, you know, that's how I have to look at it in order to be honest and to thoroughly be able to come to grips with my experience in the military as a woman, right? I'm not talking about as a Black woman this time, as a woman, period. A lot of women go in and they go in, you know, combat, non-combat, and come out still with some form of post-traumatic stress disorder, military sexual trauma, harassment, and on and on and on. And a lot of studies or reports have found that a lot of women will not disclose it. And military women are more prevalent of becoming homeless, on drugs, and often jailed too. So we deal with a lot coming out of prison and going back home to your community. That's a war zone anyway. Drug addiction, proliferation of gun violence, homelessness, poverty, human trafficking. Everything that can possibly happen to you on the street as a civilian will happen to you in the military, including gangs in the military. So it's just a lot, you know, it's everybody's individual perspective. I'm just hoping that during this post-COVID, if we get out of it, that the resources are made available on the ground for all of us that are in the trenches, because this is somewhat like this is just like combat. People are traumatized as we speak. And anyway, so we can go on and on about that, but yeah, it's a lot of contradictions here.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to add something. You know, many of our Food Not Bombs chapters have been started by veterans. So for instance, one of our veterans in Japan, when he decided not to leave Japan, when he got discharged, and he started a Food Not Bombs in one city, and now it's starting to spread throughout Japan. The Seoul, South Korea Food Not Bombs chapter was started by an active duty soldier, African-American woman who was stationed there. And she called me, and she was very upset at the poverty that she saw around the base, and she started Food Not Bombs there. So, you know, so there is a direct connection. And I think one of the most incredible stories was we have a group in Norfolk, Virginia, which is mostly vets that do, because a lot of people are discharged into Norfolk, Virginia. And I remember an news article about how they were sharing free food to people outside the base, and that there were people living in shanties against the wall of the military base where they had been discharged after the Iraq War and had no resources at all. And the only thing they could do was walk outside that base and take cardboard and build their own shelters using the wall of the base as the back of their housing. So, and it's been for years, you know, a huge percentage of people in Food Not Bombs and people that have been eating with Food Not Bombs have been vets, and we still see that today.
Thank you.
Okay. Jose or Daniel, did you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to add something that hasn't really come up, and I failed to mention in my comments before, was that, you know, the issue of immigration and how U.S. military bases are being used right now to basically separate families. So, you know, one of the ways that the government is able to get away with us protesting at some of these facilities is to, you know, give that job to the military to sort of maintain these like concentration camps of you know, refugee folks that are coming over here and you know, being separated, particularly the young people. And so, you know, I just want to lift that up and also acknowledge that, you know, we don't have a good sense of what the situation with COVID is amongst those folks that are being housed at those military bases. So that's another you know, failure and frankly, you know, corrupt way that the Trump administration is addressing this issue.
Mm-hmm. Daniel, did you want to say any more? Daniel? Okay.
I just wanted to calculate what he said on Food Not Bombs. It's true because our military are equipped to MREs, and I didn't put that earlier, but a lot of homeless gotta understand. Coalitions out there, a lot of the homeless veterans are ready for MREs. Anything with to happen with the COVID-19, MREs is our supplement of food. So I gotta remember, our MREs is the number one thing I was taught as a kid, and my dad taught me to eat MREs, and MREs is the number one thing that people gotta understand. That's your second income food. I mean, come on, Bruce. See, we were talking about this earlier, and I mean, it's just happening. I mean, I was talking with the group last night, and we're talking about MREs half of the night, just MREs and food pantries. Start getting ready because we don't know how long this thing's gonna last, and this politics is gonna last. The pandemic, we don't know what's gonna happen. You know, but thanks to our eyes and ears out there, that's all I gotta say.
All right. Well, let me just go ahead and say a couple of things, and then we want to move to a special presentation, if that's okay. First of all, MRE means meal ready to eat. And there's no doubt that I think that as Bruce just described, as Jose and Daniel and Keith were describing, our veterans, members of the veterans community are definitely stepping up, in some cases within the Homeless Union activity. And I would say even much more so, just as members of their communities who understand what it is to take care of one another, you know, and how to survive. And I want to lift up today the contribution of those members of the Homeless Union. We saw these excellent leaders today. You have some of our officer corps of the union who are also veterans, but we have dozens and hundreds of members of the Homeless Union, and we continue to recruit more and more who are really doing some of the outstanding work. They tend to be the ones who are about organizing the encampments, about helping to secure those encampments. They tend to be the ones who are in a position to advise people on how to survive. They have the perspective of they're not going to let something happen to their buddy. And so we want to lift that up. But we want to make a movement out of a moment. And at this moment, when we see the best coming out of people, despite their hurt, despite their pain, despite the scars that have been inflicted upon them, stepping up in this way, you know, rescuing themselves and rescuing others. We want to make that moment into a movement. And so what we're doing today by showing and demonstrating the continued collaboration of the Homeless Union and Food Not Bombs is a long-term project. We're in it for the long haul. We're getting certain opportunities and obligations opening up to us, but I cannot emphasize enough the importance of bringing this understanding to our members, to our Homeless Union officers, to the veterans, and all in the encampments, in the streets, in the shelters. This is a critical element, a critical aspect of what we need to do to move this movement forward. And I think the idea that we had of combining the 40th anniversary of Food Not Bombs and Memorial Day was a good idea. I think this discussion has worked exactly as we hoped it would, but it's just a beginning. So with that, I want to take a minute, and I'm going to introduce Kristen Colangelo, who's been up there uncharacteristically quiet for the webinar so far. And before I introduce her as our National Organizational Secretary and Membership Director, I just want to say a little bit more about Keith McHenry, because today is that anniversary. And history is made by movements. History is made by conditions that give rise to movements. Movements give rise to leaders who take the initiative, who are creative, who step in with an idea. And Keith McHenry, I think, is emblematic of what a leader is. You have to have leaders. Movements produce them. And leaders, in turn, can do nothing without a movement. It's a dialectic that we have to always bear in mind. Keith told me that he has spent, in the last 40 years, 500 nights in jail. Keith McHenry was beaten so savagely by the San Francisco Police Department that to this day he suffers permanent neurological injury. Keith McHenry is so enmeshed in American history. We drove with Keith up and down the East Coast last year, and every place we went, there was something about the McHenry family. General McHenry here, Surgeon General McHenry, McHenry Park. Here's an emblem, a national monument to McHenry. It seemed to us that there wasn't an aspect of American history that the McHenry family was not somehow involved with. But we have the best member of the McHenry family because we have the person, the descendant from all that great history, that contribution and concern for public well-being, Keith McHenry. So I'm going to turn it over now to Kristen, who is going to embarrass Keith a little bit more. And I'll say no more except to say, here's Kristen Colangelo. Kristen?
Thank you, Anthony. Keith, I just want to second everything that Anthony just said on behalf of the leaders of the National Union of the Homeless before and now, and nationally across this nation. If you've ever seen Takeover, you can see Keith McHenry get arrested and fight back and scream all the way into the elevator where he's taken away that HUD is a crook. And this has been a powerful, powerful ally, powerful partner in this movement, Keith. And I just met you in person this year, though your legacy goes far beyond me meeting you in person. And I have to say that you are one of the kindest, nicest, sweetest people I have ever met. No offense to anyone else on the call or my husband who's behind me, but your energy is just amazing. And it is such an honor to work with you. We have Anthony put together and we've all backed. I'm going to share the screen for a second. If you will just give me one moment. On behalf of the National Union of the Homeless, Keith, we are giving you this certification of recognition and, of course, solidarity on the 40th anniversary of Food Not Bombs, for creating and for 4 decades leading Food Not Bombs with 400 chapters in the United States and 1,000 chapters worldwide, for defying authority and going to jail to feed the people and protest the billions spent to enrich the military-industrial complex, and for your untiring and consistent support of the National Union of the Homeless. Given to you today, the 24th day of May, 2020, signed by our lead organizer, National Union of the Homeless, but on behalf of every one of the leaders from across the country, Keith, you're amazing and we love you just so dearly, and God bless you in everything that you're doing. If you all want to come off mute and clap and say solidarity forever, that'd be awesome.
Let's do that.
Nice.
Thanks, Keith.
Well, let me just wrap up then. I noticed now, looking at the certificate, that I just advanced us into the future by 200 years. Because it should, that certificate should have said the year 2020, but it says 2220. So I have now brought time travel to the homeless union movement.
Y'all look good.
But we are going to, in 200 years from now, we will look back at this period of time as the time when we had a major transformation, when we were able, and this is not going to be easy. We're not kidding ourselves at the difficulties and the challenges we face, and we're not unmindful of the suffering and hurt that's going on out there. You know what I'm saying? But nevertheless, we have no place to go but up. We have nothing to lose but our chains.
That's
so
right.
We want to encourage everyone to share what we've done today. We'll make it available for everybody to share. It will be the first of what we know will be many. Those who have attended, let me just I'll just hold this up for a second. If you can read that.
That's
That
right.
is that's the address of, that's my email address, actually. And if you want to have, get some further information about the union, I'm happy to respond to any email that you might send. We do have a national Facebook page. We have a national structure. We have locals information in 10 states and in California, where we already have almost 20 local unions up and down the state, as far north as Reading, as far south as El Centro. And across the country, we're growing and will continue to grow. And most importantly, we want to continue moving towards this close collaboration between Food Not Bombs and the Homeless Union. We want to learn the lessons of what they're doing in Santa Cruz. We want to learn the lessons of what they're doing all around the world. So unless there's objection, I will call the meeting adjourned, but want to thank everyone. Want to wish everyone a strong and safe Memorial Day. And all I can say is solidarity forever. Like we say in the Poor People's Campaign, forward together. And what do we say? Not one step back. Take care.
One step back.
Everyone, beautiful. It's so
Bye,
wonderful.
everybody. Nice meeting all of you.
Bye-bye.
Beautiful.
I put my
Hola.
email in the chat too if you need to get. Tony's sometimes very busy, so I put mine up there as well.
It would be nice to get everybody's contacts.
If you all want to email
Yeah.
me, I can collect all that information. I
Yeah.
just put it in kristen.colangelo@gmail.com. I can put all that together and send that out if that's cool with folks.
Cool.
You have mine just included.
Yep.
I want to say,
I have some of your information, but not everybody. This was a great honor. And I just want to say thank you to Anthony as well, and Savina and the other leaders that pulled this together. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks,
And
guys.
also,
Yeah,
Thanks,
Donald
guys.
Trump will be
Thanks,
honoring
bye.
you tomorrow at Fort McHenry, Baltimore.
All right, there you go.
Oh, all right.
Yeah?
What did I tell you? What did I tell you?
Fort McHenry, Baltimore, Star Spangled Banner, Fort McHenry flag, Dr. Dick McHenry, but also my great uncle shot Jesse James in the head. So that's
Come,
one of those. Thank you.
Rock on.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Anti-racist all the way.
Take care.
Bye.